JPMorgan Chase is in the midst of committing $30 billion to advancing racial equity across the country. From education to housing and business loans, the investment bankers are hoping to try to root out systemic racism, which has plagued our society for decades, and afford minority populations a better chance to succeed. I sat down with JPMorgan CEO Dimon, who was here in the Boston area, and he shared with me his motivation for this initiative. JPMorgan Chase has committed $30 billion to advance racial equity, and that means investing a lot of money in Boston. Why Boston?
Yeah. So first of all, Boston was my hometown for 8 years. I went to Tufts University, I worked here, went to Harvard Business School, but it's also a great town. I mean, I love the town. It's got huge money management, huge capability. We're opening, we have investment banking, private banking. Now we have 30 branches here, which is new, and they're doing quite well. And when we come in, we try to do everything, which includes philanthropy, financing entrepreneurs of color, affordable housing, mortgages for black families. And so we're just making the same effort here we're doing in a lot of other places.
And you've talked about breaking down barriers of systemic racism. How does the bank do that? Where will the money go?
Yeah, so $8 billion for mortgages, and we can actually track it. So we're going to actually look at where we have loan officers, where we need them, go to LMI neighborhoods, minority neighborhoods. How many loans are we making last year? How many are we going to make this year? Hire and train loan officers. We're going to hire and train black financial advisors. Affordable housing is basically number of units. So that's $12 billion for that. That's not philanthropy. There is philanthropy around certain education things, startup funds for certain homeowners, and so we try to track everything at a very detailed level, and it takes place at the local level. So I can say whatever I want in corporate headquarters, but the question is, what do we do in Boston for the black community and on these efforts we're trying to make?
And how do you measure success?
It's going to be area by area. How many mortgages you make, how many loans you hire, how many savings accounts you open. The branch is doing quite well, but we're going to have something we call a community branch, where it's bigger and you bring in the community you hire from the community and you bring in the community for financial education, small business education, et cetera. So we're pretty tough on ourselves, and we're going to report it to the world. We're not going to hide it. We're trying to be very clear about what we're trying to accomplish.
Sure. I know $7 million last year went to Edvestors, which is a nonprofit which helps the Boston public schools. In that area, it's going to be more career and college-oriented goals. When it comes to the housing and banking, those metrics are very clear. In education, how will you measure it?
Yeah. So here's what I want to do. Education is a tough one. But I think we've got to learn to measure education by output, by outcome. How many kids went through that process, whether it was a high school or a community college, and did they get a well-paying job? And so the educator and the business can help, because we know what training, not just us, but any bank or any company might need AI or cyber or advanced manufacturing skills, something like that. But it should be the outcome. So like I'm in favor of making schools free. I think if you don't have the outcome, you can end up wasting a lot of money. So we try to work. We're doing it in New York with local community colleges. I know I visited here a year or two ago. Can we get kids jobs? So to me, it's just the process. Business has to be involved. The local community colleges have to be involved. The teachers have to be supportive and understand what kind of training is needed. So
sure. Yeah. Our acting mayor in Boston, Kim Janey, remarked just a few weeks ago, the net worth of the average Boston family is over $250,000. The net worth of the average black family in Boston is $8.
Right.
So is employment a big part of this? You talk about a diverse, inclusive workplace. You want to make sure that you have a very diverse population working for JPMorgan as well?
Absolutely. And so of the 30 branches, I think like 30% are in LMI neighborhoods. When we go to those neighborhoods, we do a lot of local hiring. So you're hiring from the community. So absolutely. So, and then things like, just the mortgage, I forgot the exact numbers, but I think 65% of white Americans own a home. It's something like 45 or 50% of black Americans. And the home, that biggest part of that wealth you just talked about, is the home. So if we can just get more mortgages to black folks to get them in their homes, then they can start building that wealth that had been built up for years by some of the white families. So you have to do all of these things. There's no magic bullet. You have to do them all well. We have to do them for a sustained period of time. Business has to do it. Government has to do it. Schools have to do it. And then we can start to bend this curve a little bit.
And you've been doing a lot of this work in Detroit for several years now, a comparable sized city. Are there any lessons or any experiences that you've learned in Detroit where you talked about deploying a lot of human capital to give advice, have consultants help the city rebuild there and improve economic conditions? Any lessons there that can be applied to Boston?
Detroit is where we learned it all. We went to Detroit with the mayor. We had a great relationship with the mayor, and he was like anyone who could help us build the city. Civic society, business. He was not anti-business, anything. And we went and we sent teams of people, like 50, 60, 75 people. What do you need? He needed affordable housing, which we can obviously help. He needed mortgage for black folks. He needed advice for not-for-profits so he can double the output where these kids are being trained in jobs. So we actually sent in effectively consultants, our own people from around the world, from Mumbai, Singapore, New Orleans, to advise these not-for-profits, and it works. He's got his streetlights on. The ambulance is there quicker. Education is getting better, and of course it's hard, but it works. And so he would tell you that the people capital, the human capital, is more important than money. We can applaud the exceptionalism of America, freedom of speech, freedom of enterprise, the principles on which this nation was born. It is still, if you travel the world, it is still the shining light city on the hill. That does not mean we can't acknowledge our flaws. All countries have flaws. And I think we can do both. And I don't like when people tear down the country. It's done wonderful things, and yes, it did some terrible things, as has every country on this planet, by the way. And so, and then, we should try to fix that. But I don't like tearing down the United States of America.
Not to ignore it, but keep perfecting the imperfect union, right? Let's talk about the post-pandemic economy just quickly. You anticipate a boom?
Yes. So there's not the market, there's the economy. You're going to have probably one of the strongest economies you've seen ever, maybe ever in the history of possibly of America. And it can easily go on for years because there's a lot of unspent stimulus money. There's more stimulus money coming. There's QE. The pandemic, thank God these vaccines, people want to get out, restaurants are on. We see travel, domestic travel for leisure is now higher than it was pre-COVID.
There's certainly a lot of pent-up anticipation for activity. Yep. And then there's that little concern, obviously the government is spending trillions of dollars. Unemployment benefits have been extended through the fall to the point where a lot of businesses can't find workers. How worried are you about inflation?
It is a legitimate concern. So in the short run, let's enjoy the growth. I do think you see inflation. I don't think it's be temporary. Hopefully it's contained. Hopefully it's low and not too bad and rates go up a little bit. If you have a very strong economy with kind of not bad inflation and rates go up, even if they go up to 3% the 10-year or 2% the short end, we'll be fine. Now, if it's higher than that, which is possible, I've been a risk manager, we've never seen this kind of deficit spending ever. Okay, except in World War II, but half that money is spent on a war.
Larry Summers wrote about the potential for overheating the economy, and nobody seems to really be worried about that.
No, it's a legitimate concern. We should be worried about it. But on the other hand, you're going to have this good growth, and people go back to work, and I think people will be very happy about that. And then you'll have hopefully not too bad inflation. But one of the other important factors. That's why it's so important that this money be spent wisely.
Sure.
If we spend the money and we actually build highways and we actually fix the bridges and we actually train the kids, but the outcomes, how many miles did you build, how many kids got good jobs, if we spend it wisely, that will increase productivity, increase growth, reduce inflation, reduce the deficit, relative to what it would have been. And if we waste it, and so I'm like a fanatic now, let's make sure every dollar someone's responsible for, and we know what the outcome we expect is, and then we track to the outcome. And the American public is entitled to that. The government shouldn't just take trillions of dollars and not say, hey, here's what I owe you. I'm going to get you these kind of jobs, and I'm going to do these kind of things. Not how much you spent, outcomes.
Yeah, that's certainly going to be the fight in Congress about how the president is going to pay for this. You famously this week said you're done with the Zoom meetings, you're canceling them all, and you want to get back to the office. Is it time for America to get back to the office?
Yeah, safely. My view is that most of us learned by the apprenticeship system. You learn by making mistakes, you learn by other people, you have spontaneous combustion of ideas. The office is important. And obviously local laws will matter, but other than that, we are expecting people to start coming. On May 17th, we said, one day, could just come in, try it out. It's very safe. Most people get sick at home on the weekends. And a lot of these kids that we talk about who love it, they're out all weekend. They're not staying home in their apartment protecting themselves from the pandemic. So I'm a little skeptic that it'll get much more back to normal. And yes, of course, you have more hybrid working. It accelerated that. We already had a bunch of that anyway, so.
Do you expect 20–30% of the workforce might work from home one or a couple of days a week?
Yeah, 100 million people go to work every day. and included among them is not the press. 40 million people don't go to work every day, and people don't really even know those numbers. So at JPMorgan, we estimate about 60% will go to work every day. Our branch has been open the whole time. We have operations functions, risk functions, cash vault functions, where you need the people there physically. And then a lot of people, it's already hybrid. Bankers, they travel half the time. So yeah, we estimate 30% of the people have some kind of hybrid schedule. It might be 2 days in and 3 days out, or vice versa, something like that. But people you need to come in into, like you guys go to your newsrooms and you learn a lot. Yeah. If you stay at home, you're not going to learn a lot. And
We've been to a skeletal staff over the last year, but as vaccinations pick up and as the numbers begin to fall, you expect people to go back.
And we're expecting 50% on average by mid-July.
Yeah. And you mentioned infrastructure.
I've been working in the office every day since June.
You've been every day. You've been back. You've been one of those people that needs the office. And you enjoy the interaction.
Yes.
And you think that's
I'm on this road trip. I saw 70 clients last night. I did some with Harvard Business School students. I saw our management team. It's doing all this great expansion in Boston. And it's fun. And you learn a lot. I learned from my clients. I learned from the management team. I learned from listening to the professors here. And yeah, I like these road trips.
Yeah. And as much as people valued Zoom over the last year, I think a lot of people are tired of it. They want to see people in person. Can I ask you one quick question? In your annual letter a couple of weeks ago that you put out, there was it was very optimistic. There's a little warning in there about China. And I always wonder, from someone from your position, what should the average American worker be thinking about or paying attention to when it comes to China?
So it is the most important relationship for the next 100 years, these two countries. But here's for the American public. Our GDP per person is 65,000. Theirs is 10. They have serious problems, which they know about. I'm not criticizing them. They don't have enough food, water, and energy. We do. We've got the best institutions in the world, the most prosperous nation in the world, the most innovation in the world. We have wonderful neighbors in Mexico and Canada, and the great military barriers called the Atlantic and the Pacific. They have, surrounded by Korea, Philippines, Japan, Indonesia, Vietnam, Pakistan, India, and Russia. They have a tough road to go. They still have hundreds of millions of people living in poverty, a huge amount of corruption, and they're trying to tackle those problems. So America hasn't lost its hand. There are serious issues we should focus on: trade, fairness of trade, security issues and stuff like that. I'm hoping the Biden administration will do that kind of privately and quietly, but properly. But we have nothing to fear of China like people are making it out to be, and we should make sure we fix our own problems.
Yeah.
Because we are the arsenal of democracy that's based upon the most prosperous nation on the planet. So let's keep the nation prosperous. Let's keep people educated and happy and healthy, fix our problems, and we're going to do fine against China. But we are in competition. And so we should know that. But to me, that's just another argument why we should win these other things.
They have been going around the globe making a lot of moves. Well, everybody's been very focused on the pandemic, their sort of Belt and Road Initiative, sort of vaccine diplomacy, as it's become called. But if the 20th century was the American century, can we do it again?
Yes. Yes, like in 20 years, our GDP per person will be $85,000 and $90,000 a person. Those will be like 60. Okay, our demographics are very good, and you can't replicate these American universities and the American know-how and skill and innovation. So let's keep it healthy. I mean, I think our worst enemy has been ourselves, our inability to do infrastructure, immigration, all these policies we spoke about. It hasn't been China doing well, and we should be very clear. And so we still have that most prosperous nation. And the other thing is, as they get bigger and more complex, you can't macro manage the economy that much anymore. It gets a little more complicated than that, and they're going to have another series of problems. So, no, the game's not over here.
But we need to focus on education.
Absolutely.
All right, Jamie Dimon from JPMorgan, thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.